Hello everyone and welcome to the last episode of Vet Talks Season 3. I'm your host, Alfred Pallarca, one of the project managers at EVBB, and we have here today a special guest, Daiana Huber from CPIP. Hi Daiana, how are you?
Hi Alfred, nice. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being the last guest for the third season of Vet Talks. And many of the EVB community know you, and we also know you from your works at CPIP. But if you would like to introduce yourself for our guests or an audience that might not know who you are.
Of course, I'd love to. I'm a grant writer, first and foremost, and I'm part of the management team for the Center for Promoting Lifelong Learning, which is an NGO in Timișoara, Romania. Member of EVBB, of course, and we do a lot of centralized and decentralized Erasmus projects, promoting lifelong learning, which is our main goal. I started with a bachelor degree in pedagogy, so this is why I'm a bit more at ease with the conversation going on in Erasmus, because Erasmus is about learning and education and everything that has to do with that ecosystem. But for the last 15 years, I had the opportunity to work and to cooperate with an amazing ecosystem, which is the criminal correctional justice one, meaning prison, probation, social work, counseling, and all the other services related to and supporting people in the custody of the state.
Thank you for that introduction. And I think, we know the work that you have been doing for with CPIP, and also we have a lot of projects together with EVBB. And so speaking of CPIP, I know that your organization has been active in many lifelong learning projects, especially in VET, for over 2 decades now. Maybe you could give us more example or overview of your mission and how your role contributes to that vision.
Our mission sounds straightforward, but it is, I think, one of the most complex challenges all the organizations working at European level have. Making lifelong learning realistic, practical, and accessible to people in our local community. That is straightforward the mission of CPIP. That means we invest, develop, we bring to center stage Europe, the local stakeholders and their needs, and we reinvest and we co-invest alongside European Commission into projects that are relevant for our professionals and practitioners, so that at the end of the day we contribute in securing competent citizens, as in opposite to what might one think is more relevant, the skilled worker. So we believe that VET and every part of the formal, informal and non-formal education, every stakeholder has a duty, a responsibility and a privilege to represent the learner in all its complexity. And being a competent citizen is one of the utmost goals that we can wish for in the European way of life.
Absolutely, and I think what you mentioned is that there's so many going on in Brussels and in the center of Europe, and it's good to always decentralize that and allocate the budget, the projects activities in the more rural areas or different regions, right? Because we don't want a more centralized or having the attention in this echo chamber, in this bubble. So I think it's important work that you're doing. And speaking of projects, you mentioned that you have done projects and you're a grant writer as well, and you have coordinated many EU funded projects. So you're quite of an expert, especially through CPIP. Can you share some projects that you are particularly proud of, and tell us how this specific project impacted learners or educators on the ground, especially in Timișoara and Romania?
So we have a couple of projects now that go in parallel. There are 4, and they are all 4 part of the same, let's say, facet of what we try to do, to create a realistic understanding of what it means, democratization of learning. And these projects, these 4, I keep saying a triad, but it's not a triad because there are 4 of them, they pinpoint a couple of firsts for us. We have the first COVE, which means Center of Vocational Excellence in the ecosystem in the whole Europe. Nobody ever had a Center for Vocational Excellence in the correctional ecosystem. We have an innovation alliance and a capacity building at the same time that are looking to improve learning opportunities on the same topic but on two different perspectives. Higher education, so preparing the future practitioners in the field, and at the same time looking at the same competencies but with a different approach to develop already working and already experienced practitioners in the other projects. So we are trying to see how fluent the lifelong learning experience can be, all from the perspective of a VET. VET doesn't necessarily mean school. VET doesn't necessarily mean schooling age. And the VET doesn't necessarily mean a practical and strictly practical approach. So we want to explore and play a bit around the informal, non-formal ways of delivering equal quality VET, but different ways of approaching different stages in the learner's life. And that is something, I think, a truly unique opportunity for us to bring into the European conversation. And yeah, those were three. And the fourth, which is like the cherry on the top, it is a Blueprint Alliance. That type of a project that is the highest ranking projects in the Erasmus ecosystem. Yeah. And that Blueprint Alliance gives us the opportunity to represent, again, the practitioners and the professionals in the ecosystem, somehow circumventing the formality of institutional structures and bringing their voices exactly in the conversation here in Brussels related to the economical sector. What is an economical sector? Who gets to be there? Who gets to be upskilled and reskilled, and what are the opportunities there? And we want to bring the voices of exactly the intended users straight into the policy conversation of how upskilling and reskilling gets to be decided.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important because what you're doing is that you are based in Romania and you are bringing back the knowledge from the ground back here as EVBB, and that's one of the mission that we are doing as EVBB, and that's why we have members all over EU, but outside of EU as well, because since we are in front of the Berlaymont, so we're able to be kind of like the funnel back to the, you know, where the policies are being created and being changed. So it's good to have members like you who are being able to tell us the latest trend, the latest necessity from the workers that are actually in the ground working. And also thank you for defining COVID, because it's also important for us. Since we're in this ecosystem, it's we're used to the acronyms, and maybe some people don't know all the acronyms, so it's also essential to do this. So yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And I know that you were talking about many projects that you have done, and a lot of them are focusing on social inclusion, I think you mentioned earlier, and also access to education for marginalized learners groups. How do you approach the design of VET projects that promote both skills development and social justice? How can we better design such projects?
Our work focuses on the practitioners and the professionals in the criminal correctional justice ecosystem. That means uniformed and non-uniformed staff and volunteers. And we decided this approach because our end users and beneficiaries would be people under the custody of state or people with lived experiences in contact with the justice system, but they need the context and the support, and they need the structure of authorities that are designed with a modern perspective of justice. We are not there yet. That is a working process. We represent a pact for skill and teams and partnerships that are not necessarily leading the conversation in structural reforms in justice. That is something a bit outside of our mandate. And then we figured out that through lifelong learning, we also can have a voice and a contribution in this big reform that is going on in Europe through the people that are actually implementing it on the ground, that themselves are learners. And once we support a modern vision of how justice can be supported and delivered through interesting training, to training that is catered specifically to their needs, then they become more accurate, better, more precise, more competent in the services they deliver. So we are not trying to reform the services, we are trying to support the people that deliver them by encouraging them into lifelong learning experiences. That is how we reach the end beneficiaries. Now, coming back to your question, because I wanted to have this caveat to make sure that our listeners understand we do not do direct interventions with people in custody, but we do a secondary kind of intervention, which is for the professionals and at the end of the day for the system in itself in this reforming process. Going back to, it is about creating experiences where people feel safe, taken into consideration, and respected as adults. No matter how marginalized or privileged the population is, an adult learner is an adult learner at the end of the day. And if we don't respect and acknowledge the person and its entire complexity, no matter how good technically the learning experience is curated, internally, it will not make sense. And learning is meaning making.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't make meaning and sense, the learner cannot connect with the learning experience. It doesn't get internalized, it doesn't produce change. That is one aspect. The second aspect is locality. Make it relevant for the people on the ground level. The curricula is actually the context in which we deliver. And I speak Bruxelles, but none of my beneficiaries have to. It's my job to translate and curate possibilities that are set up here into practicalities of the context in our local communities.
Absolutely.
I think that is the quintessential thought process when we deliver vet experiences or any other kind of experience, trying to label them as curating learning.
I think the key word from what you said is localization or adaptation, regionalization, or many different variations of this word, where you have to adapt what's happening to different realities. And that was actually a follow-up question that I have, but you answered it already, is that how do you adapt, learning to different realities? And I think you answered that quite well. So I think it's very important, because not everyone, it's not a one size fits all, as you mentioned. Vet is for different aspect, different people, different realities. So it's very important.
And there are two other aspects along this topic. One, meet people where they are, because we change instances, we change positions, we change roles throughout our life. If it is called lifelong learning, meet the learner in its stage where it is. Don't expect the learner to come into your story. If you are curating learning experiences for them, go into their story.
Absolutely.
That is, I think, fundamental to speak the language of the learner. Otherwise, again, we will go back to the same conversation. It's meaning making. Does it make sense or it doesn't for the person to join and to take part in some learning experience?
And we can kind of tie that into the project that we are working on together, which is DG Green, and we just had the final TPM today and the final conference tomorrow. But DG Green, I think what we learned is that there's aging sector workers in the postal sector, and we have to go to them and see how we can upskill them. We can't just say that this is their things that you need to learn, and we produce it, and we don't talk to them and see how they would like to learn. So we need to adapt to their reality as well. So
And you used a very good example. And a practical thing from DG Green Post, which we are closing now. We discussed about, for example, digitalization, which means a lot of things to a lot of people. And we developed a curricula in the project, and we developed learning outcomes, and we developed all kinds of technical things that are related to teaching, to delivering, piloting, and things like that. But then the essential part, and unfortunately a lot of our colleagues are missing that one. We didn't miss it in DG Green Post, but I want to encourage colleagues, especially the grant writers, to include this. Talk to people, because digitalization in the Netherlands means something, but in Romania or in Greece it means a totally different thing.
Yes, yeah.
And we had meetings based on CPIP's methodology, the DACUM one. Well, it's not our methodology, but we have been using it so much around Europe that by now it's becoming something included in a lot of projects. With our methodology, we had workshops with people, and we were discussing about digitalization. And I had the opportunity to listen to postal service workers. And some of them were saying, for me, digitalization means knowing how to start the computer, knowing how to connect my phone to my computer. That is digitalization for me. For other postal workers, for them was like, we brought drones and we are going to use drones, and for me digitalization, and they were like super excited about it, is to learn how to operate a drone. Equally valid, because it comes from the worker.
Absolutely.
Equally valid, and it is our shared responsibility to cater and curate to both realities. And it's not our place to say this is or this is not.
Yes.
The reality, the context, the carrier of meaning comes from the learner.
Absolutely.
As professionals, it's our job to curate it into an experience that can provide exactly what is needed. The start button or the platform to operate the drones.
No, you're absolutely correct. Everyone has different realities, and that's and I think it's a perfect segue. What you're talking about is because you said that we need to collaborate, we need to talk to each other through different transnational collaborations. So I think it's quite important, especially in many projects, in all the projects that we are doing, because we cannot work in silos. So in your opinion, through this transnational collaboration, what are CPIP brings to EU partners to co-create learning solutions, and what values did these cross-border projects add to your work, and how do you make sure that the results are eventually transferred back to Romania?
The work that we do, the work that I do, is transferred back to a lot of member states. It's not necessarily focused on Romania or any particular country. It is focused on all the countries in my consortiums. It's my responsibility, my moral responsibility, but also my practical responsibility as a grant writer and, in some cases, project manager, which I would rather not, because I'm not a very good project manager. My colleagues know that. But I have exceptionally good colleagues at being project managers, and I watched them and I watched their struggle in sharing with the partnerships the fact that, as harsh as it sounds, nobody's coming. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to fix the reality. Nobody's coming to provide you a model. Nobody's coming to provide you a solution. Once you accept that, you realize that you have a lot of freedom to co-create locally the solution. No project will ever be able to create the methodology and at a European level or international level and then deploy it like a flat pack furniture and set it up in 12 regions, let's say, simultaneously with the same outcome. That is set up for failure. Each community constructs its regional action plan, its regional development strategy, its regional vision of what you want for your community, and then we have it in the context of a transnational or European project. Again, I encourage my colleagues, grant writers, to actually talk to the people on the ground and ask their needs, because that is a practical way to put them in a European context.
Absolutely, yes.
And nowhere, in no European handbook, has ever been written that all partners in a project have to implement identically activities.
Yes.
There is no such thing.
Yes, yes.
Even if you say you do it like that, you're not telling the truth.
Yeah, because each population demographic have different needs and different...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the best possible approach is to co-create locally and to synthesize, promote, draw conclusions, look at the policy from Europe perspective.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know it bypasses the national authority, and I love doing that. I absolutely love doing that.
But it's important, you know, when you're creating these reports, deliverables, when you're seeing what the findings eventually, it's good to synthesize the different findings from each country and create some sort of a narrative, or not narrative, but document saying what you have learned from doing it from different contexts and different
Yes,
backgrounds.
because the treasure, again, sits in the voice of the learner.
Yeah. Speaking of learners, I know in a lot of your projects there's a lot of adult learners. From what your experience, what are the key factors you think that motivates adults in engaging in VET, and what keeps them motivated to learn, to be upskilled?
That is one of the hardest questions. And by the way, I'm sure that you had no way of knowing, but that was the topic of my bachelor thesis,
Oh, okay.
The motivation in adult education. The surface answers, or the accessible ones, are treat adults as adults, stop putting them in a chair and a desk like in the school, don't use materials that you use in schools, but that is the easy surface answer. We need to dig a bit deeper, and we need to look of what is the previous experience of our learner. Because unfortunately, and I am part of the system, I'm not talking as if I'm from the outside, but the schooling system has produced a lot of damage. And if we address the learners as if we are reschooling them, we are reactivating a lot of things that create resistance to learning. Because in the head of people, learning sometimes is associated with schooling, which by far it is not. And it's not that I have become illuminated out of the blue, but I have a colleague that was once part of the CPIP team, Maria Zoya, and she works a lot on this, and I read a couple of her pieces, and then my wheels started turning about deschooling the adults and inviting them in interesting learning experiences that are not assimilated to going back to school, but are more assimilated to having interesting, relevant adult experiences. Because at the end of the day, we are not learning new things, but we are learning new ways of reframing the things that we know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And in adult VET, in the adult education world, our learners have these particularities, whether we like it or not. Some have been part of difficult social context, difficult economical context, difficult family situation, or difficult political at war areas and things like that. So not everybody is coming fresh out of a box. We are adults, we have experience. That is a plus and a minus. And that means we as developers need to be exceptionally aware of that and build the content and curate the experience in such a way that is relevant for an adult. It doesn't trigger and activate a lot of things that we don't want to, that hinder motivation at the end of the day. And then yes, it needs to be relevant, it needs to bring a value, it needs to or not be micro-credentialized, certified, accredited. that is exceptionally expensive from a lot of perspectives, and we need to keep asking, do we really need that? Do my adults need that? Because if yes, perfect. There are a lot of things that we can work and develop, but not all adults need formalized things.
Yeah.
Most of the adults need supporting experiences. Then that is relevant for job and in the real life, of course.
Yeah, I think from what you're saying is make it more appealing to them, maybe a better incentive because, yeah, as you mentioned, maybe perhaps the idea of schooling might be triggering for some and they don't want to maybe go back because of XYZ reasons. So
Absolutely.
make it more inviting in a sense. So yeah, I think thank you for that. I have two more questions. In a region like this is going on a different route. In a region like Western Romania, how does CPIP build partnership with local stakeholders, employers, school communities to make sure that VET projects are rooted in real needs? I mean, we mentioned already adapting it in different realities, but and also with adult learners. But how does your organization, make sure that this partnership are existing to make sure that the needs are being met and is there? So
when I started my career, which is a very long time ago, we were, as a country, in something that is called pre-accession funds.
okay.
So do the math, that was before Romania was part of EU. And the pre-accession funds meant we got to see a lot of models on how to set up different kind of systems, especially for education. And for a while, I worked at the Education Ministry in Romania, taking care of the VET side of setting up the education system. And we had funding through FARE program, long time ago. And this program also provided some sort of exchange of experiences, and we got some very interesting methodologies talking about local and regional action plans. And they were to put everybody at the table and decide VET classrooms, what the employer needs. 20 years ago, that was a very exotic way of doing things to decide the number of classrooms and how many kids would be invited for VET schools. But that particular methodology stuck with me because it was an exceptionally simple way of putting everybody in a region around the table and giving them a voice. And then also having authorities not meeting for the sake of meeting, but then meeting, making conclusions, handing them to the authorities, in that particular case school inspectorates, and then follow through with decisions for the next year. How many funds would be allocated, how many classrooms will be set up, and things like that. And yeah, that method kept doing things into my head until at one point I said, but why did I ever stop using that? Because I saw how it works. I know how to put people around table. At least that is one thing that I know how to do. And then we have piloted and it works. And in West Romania, at least in the correctional ecosystem, we do that. We put everybody relevant in the conversation at the same table, and we look for co-production and co-decision. Some time ago, I talked to a lot of prison officers, and they were kind enough to let me have this kind of job shadowing with them. And then I have asked, who do you talk to over the phone? Let's make a list of people that you reach out on the phone when you are trying to do XYZ activities for people in custody. And then we made a list. Okay, if you call them, it means that those are the relevant people. Let's see from what institutions and organizations they are. Let's see why you call them, why do they call you back, and sky's the limit. Let's put everybody on the list. And this is how slowly we created formal partnerships, but not through institutional accord. Because if you ask in a region, yes, of course, everybody has institutional agreements with everybody, but they're just that, papers signed in a drawer. Let's make real coffee dates networking events, or however you want to call them, with the purpose of solving a problem. Like a case management approach. Look, we have this problem. We need to find employers for this group of people. Let's meet and have a conversation. Who can do what? Who has possibility? Who has access? Let's figure out a solution, because nobody's coming to figure it out for us.
I think you just described perfectly the power of networking and stakeholder engagement. So, which is, I think, something that we do here as well at EVBB. I think that's how we find most of our members, through stakeholder engagement, networking, going to different events, creating a list of people that you know, and building on from that and building more and more partnership and collaboration. So,
and this is why we are happy to be members of EVBB, because this is how it works.
Yes, yes. So for my final question, looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future of VET and VET in Romania, in Europe, around the world? And also, if CPIP could influence one major shift in the system, what would you advocate for?
You are challenging me to all kind of charged political conversations, which I know better to step out of, because, I'm one of the most radicalized people in Europe. In my field of work, radicalized is the it concept to have. And I'm using it more or less as self-irony. I'm very determined to bring as much as possible the voice of the learner in the conversation. That is fundamental for me. Talking about future, I think it's an interesting situation, because we are filming in the day, or was it yesterday, that the College of Commissioners voted the working program for 2026 of the European Commission. And now we have the documents saying what is going to happen, what piece of legislation is going to be submitted, what are the priorities, how us grant writers should calibrate for the next year. The document is there. Education and upskilling and reskilling, this classical conversation, of course it is there, because we have a very strong voice in the Commissioner Mânzatu's work and her team. However, there is a small caveat. Even if, when we participated in launching the conversation of the Union of Skills, the VET strategy was mentioned, and it was mentioned more or less for this year somehow. In this annual work program, there is no VET strategy mentioned yet. So it is still in the working process. We still don't have the formal documents or the outline of where we are going, and that is one relevant piece of work for us. So I hope to see in this strategy that is going to be launched at one point, maybe not this year because it's not in the program, I don't know, but that is your territory to know, because you're right across from the seat of executive power, let's say.
Yeah, we're in front of it.
What am I looking for is to see the portability of skills concept made practical and human for the learner, not for national qualification authorities, not for the ministries, not for the inspectorates, not for any formal qualification establishments. Because if we miss this point, and the portability of skills will become once more a conversation for the national qualification authorities, the democratization of learning is going to take a step back. So my hope is to see a mechanism where the ecosystems with relevant actors get to confirm that a learner is a good practitioner. A confirmation is just that, a confirmation. It's not a diploma, it's not a certification. A confirmation, it can be a micro-credential, issued by the authorities of content and context, not by the authority of legislation.
I think you hit it on the nail. We have plenty to look for, many projects to work on to improve vocational education, portability of skills, micro-credentials, all of these topics. So yeah, I think we have plenty to develop and to hope for in the future. Any final thoughts for our conversation about adult learning collaboration before we go?
I would invite colleagues that write grants to write from the perspective of the learners' voices and not from the perspective of persuading and checking the list of the evaluators and all this new trend that goes on LinkedIn, 10 tips on how to persuade the evaluators and use this AI tool to create the correct wording. And excellent, it's not about that.
It's about the learners eventually.
It's about the voice of the learner. It's about putting that in writing. That is one message, and I highly encourage colleagues to join because it is a relevant profession. And the second message is for the learning, well, technically it's not correct to say learning providers because learning is an internal process, no one can provide it for me. The education provider, there you go. Education providers, please jump in partnerships.
Absolutely.
Because the structure and the context is right, and if education providers are not making their voices visible, they will disappear from the conversation and be replaced by employers that think they can school their workers. We don't want employers to school their workers. We want the learners to have access to education provision. So it is time, high time, to have a voice in the conversation because they're going to be made obsolete by the employers if they don't step up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's a key message is the learners. So thank you so much, Daiana Huber. Thank you for being here all the way from Romania. And that's it for this season of Vet Talks.